Around 200 years ago, a man who was believed to be a vampire was buried in an 18th century Connecticut graveyard. Shortly after his burial, his body was dug up and precautions were taken to ensure that the so-called bloodsucker did not rise from the dead. He was reburied with his head and his limbs laid out on his chest. This is common for that time in history, when people believed there were supernatural forces at work. In 1990, archaeologists decided to dig up the body once again to find out if this man was really a vampire. And of course, surprise surprise, he wasn't. But nearly 30 years later, with more understanding and profiling, the scientists identified the man by using genetic evidence from the skeleton. They think the man was named John Barber, who died at the age of 55. John was more than likely a farmer who died from tuberculosis. Lesions on his ribcage all pointed towards this disease, and it was probably because this man was suffering from this illness which caused many people to believe that he was a vampire. You see, people who suffered from tuberculosis were left pale and weak and would cough up blood. Also, the gums would recede, leaving the teeth looking larger than they should, and they become thinner and gaunt, exposing the cheekbones, making them look drastically different. And lastly, they would cough up blood, which did not help when people already suspected them being a vampire when they appeared to have blood around their mouth. So just imagine it, this poor man would have died from a horrible death, whilst all the while he was believed to be a vampire. I mean, in those days, and remember we're going back 200 years now, people back then were very superstitious. And if they believed that a dead body could possibly be a vampire, they would dig up that body and examine it for any kind of signs. And crazily enough, the signs that you were a vampire were if you were bloated, if you had long fingernails, or if your hair had grown longer since you were buried, and many more signs that are now known as normal signs of decomposing. So, like I said, in those days, some people weren't very well educated when it comes to anatomy and decomposition of dead bodies. But, you know, at least 200 years later, I suppose the story's got a little bit of closure, and John Barber has finally been cleared of being a vampire, and now he can finally rest in peace. And last but not least, I want to end the episode on a happy note. I want to finish with a story of love, a story of romance that cannot be tamed.